welcome to COS Indiana Live. There's never been a more important time in our history than now if you believe it's time to stand up and be free. Stay tuned and come back every Monday at 7 p.m. as our state director and host, Dale Parrish, present the need for self-governance. Our COS Indiana vision statement is to build a grassroots community of Hoosier citizens and legislators dedicated to the constitutional concept of self-governance. So, take it away, Dale.
Well, good evening, everyone. Thank you, Maringo Mike, for that introduction, and welcome to our broadcast. As Maringo Mike stated, my name's Dale Parrish. I am the State Director for Convention of States here in Indiana. And again, we want to welcome you to our broadcast this evening. So I just want to also mention again that we're trying to target this broadcast to those of you in the state of Indiana that are not part of our group, Convention of States, as yet. Now, obviously and certainly, we welcome anyone that wants to view our broadcast, regardless of where you're located. But those of you, those Hoosiers here in the state of Indiana that are not part of our movement yet, you're the ones that we're targeting this broadcast to. So please keep that in mind. Now, I do want to once again make everyone aware that we are now also, this broadcast, I'll mention this later on again too, but this broadcast basically comes to you through Facebook, our state Facebook page, Convention of States Indiana. But we are now also live streaming the broadcast through our YouTube channel, COS Indiana. So if any of you prefer to view this through YouTube, or if you have friends maybe that don't utilize Facebook but do YouTube, please let them know that we are live streaming through YouTube, COS, and our YouTube channel, COS Indiana. All right, let me quickly just let you know the different segments that our broadcast involves. The first segment will be a discussion topic, and sometimes we will, in fact, have a topic that we'll discuss, maybe have a panel discussion to talk about. What we like to do most of the time is we like to interview leadership individuals from here in Indiana, find out what they're doing and how they're exercising their rights as to self-govern. And once in a while, we'll bring on someone from our national group in Convention of States. But so tonight we have one of our volunteers. I call her a super volunteer. One of our Convention of States volunteers, Debbie Stewart, who has been bringing us chapters of constitutional literacy. And we have her lined up tonight to bring us another chapter on constitutional literacy. So we'll bringing her in. We'll be bringing her on here very, very shortly. Now, after the discussion topic area or segment, we'll get into some general information. I'll bring up a PowerPoint that I have prepared, and we'll give you some general information on how we're doing here in the state, share some numbers with you so that you have a better understanding of how we're doing here in the state. Now, after that segment, we'll get into viewer recognition, and in this segment, any viewers that we have this evening, we'll certainly try to recognize those. If you have a comment or a question, feel free, as a viewer, feel free to enter that through the chat section, and we'll try our best to post those and address those comments and questions. Then the final segment is going to be what I call the invitation segment, and this is the segment where I'm going to actually invite you to join Convention of States, and plus we'll wrap things up for the evening. We'll also let you know what we're going to be talking about on our next broadcast, which will be next Monday evening, which will be the 24th of August. So those are the segments that we will be covering this evening. So without further ado, I'm going to bring on then our guest for this evening. And if I can locate her down here in the screen, and we'll turn her audio on and bring her on up here. Hi, Debbie.
Hi, Dale.
Good. Glad to see you. Thanks for coming on tonight.
My pleasure.
And as I mentioned, ladies and gentlemen, this is Debbie Stewart. Like I said, I call Debbie our super volunteer. She's a homeschool teacher, and she teaches constitutional literacy as one of the topics that she teaches. So she has agreed to come on our broadcast about once a month and give us a chapter. So you ready to go tonight, Debbie?
I am.
All right. Now, she tells me that she's going to be talking about the freedom of speech and the press, which is a very appropriate topic, I think, given what's going on in our country today. So, Debbie, I will, from this point on, I will let you take it away. And I know the first area you want to talk about is objectives. So go, take it away.
Sure thing. So this chapter of Constitutional Literacy by Michael Ferris has three main objectives to teach. The first one is to recognize that freedom of speech and the press means that nobody needs to get permission ahead of time to say or to write or publish anything, but you're accountable for what you say afterwards. So whatever you write or say, you're responsible for what effect that has on others. The second thing is that there are three different kinds of speech that can be legally limited without violating the Constitution. We'll go through all three of those. And thirdly, we want to understand that speech cannot be restricted on the basis of its content. It can be restricted on like where you're doing it and when you're doing it, some parameters around there, but you can't be silenced solely based on the content of your speech. And then, so before we get into the first section, then we just have a couple terms I want to cover. So the first term is prior restraint, and basically that means that a government prohibits your expression before you even give the expression. So they come ahead of you and say you can't do this. And then the second term is defamation of character. And defamation of character is basically statements about a person that are both false and they damage their character. Both damaging and false is defamation of character. And so if you look at this chapter on a broad spectrum, the main point is the first point I talked about in objectives is that you can say whatever you want here in America. That's the beauty of freedom of speech and the freedom of the press. But you are accountable for what you say. So you don't ever have to get prior approval. But you can be held accountable for that. You can speak freely, but it requires that we take responsibility for what we say. All right. So based on that, then I do want to explain a little bit about prior restraint. So back in England, before we came to America, there was something called prior restraint that the king would use, meaning that books were not published until the king actually approved them with his authority. And so when the founding fathers came, even the King James Bible that was printed and published in 1611, the same thing. He had to approve the whole thing before it could get published. So when the founding fathers came over, they wanted to ensure that never again was it necessary to gain the government's approval to say or to write something. And that's what we said, the practice of requiring that government approval is called prior restraint. So the first rule was all prior restraints on the exercise of First Amendment freedoms are presumptively unconstitutional. So our founding fathers made that very clear. But again, that doesn't mean that everything you say is constitutionally protected, because it can have consequences. So So if you abuse those rights, you can say or write whatever you want, but if you abuse those rights, you could be held accountable through criminal charges or a civil lawsuit. So that's kind of the main idea here. We love our freedom of speech and freedom of the press, but we have to be careful what we say and how we say it. We have to make sure it's true. We don't want to damage anybody's character. But unfortunately, we see a lot of that going on here in our country, and we've gotten very loose as far as speaking truth about people and things that happen, and showing true pictures on the television, relating that to things that actually happen. And I think we've got in the habit of, I've even been a part of something here in Indiana where there was something that went on at the courthouse, and I was not there, but a very close friend of mine did go. And that friend said, oh yeah, A, B, and C happened, but the way the press reported on it was D, E, and F happened. And they were shocked at the difference in the two. So that leads me into talking about, there are 3 areas that it is constitutional to limit freedom of speech and our freedom of the press. And those 3 items are defamation, obscenity, and inciting violence. So the first one we want to talk about is defamation of character. So defamation of character, after what we said earlier, is when we say something that is both false and damaging to someone. And if it's done in written form, it's called libel. But if we actually speak it out and we tell false things about somebody, it's called slander. So slander and libel are not protected under the Constitution. That's why we say freedom of speech is not absolute. You can't just say whatever you want, whenever you want, because of these 3 exception areas.
So if you say something that's defaming against someone's character, then you're not protected by the Constitution. You could be liable. That person could sue or take legal action against you, is what you're saying.
That is correct.
You're not protected by the Constitution. Yes. Okay.
And then in freedom of speech, it's dealt with a little bit differently. If you're an ordinary citizen, it's much stricter. If you say something and defame them in any way, the penalty, the courts are much stricter on how they're going to deal with you on that. But if you're a public figure or public official, there's a little bit of leeway, because people who report on people, they're out in the open, and they can expect to be picked on a little bit because they've chosen to be out in the forefront. But you actually, if it's a public figure, you actually have to prove something called actual malice. And that is, it's an intentional commission of a wrongful act that causes harm to another person. But you have to prove that it's actual malice, all right? And the way that you do that, there are 2 possibilities you can prove it. If the paper publishes a deliberate falsehood against you, then that's considered actual malice. And if the paper publishes something with a reckless disregard of whether it was true or false, that would also be considered actual malice. Okay, so that's with more of a public figure. But the normal citizen, you shouldn't be able to do any of that. But there is some leeway if you are a public official, and we see that every day. Right. On the internet and things like that. So people try to get away with whatever they can, and these things aren't prosecuted a lot either. So but some people will try to sue you if you do that, and others will let it go. So good faith is a defense. If it's a public figure, you can say, well, in good faith, I really was reporting what I thought was true. Okay. But if it's an ordinary citizen, that is not a defense. You can't say, well, I used good faith, but I accidentally told something that was a lie, but I thought it was truth. It doesn't work for an ordinary citizen. Okay, so not only is freedom of speech not absolute, but freedom of the press is also not absolute. So far we have the defamation of character. So the second area that is also constitutional to limit our freedom of the press and speech is obscenity. And obscenity can be punished by law without violating the Constitution or the First Amendment of the Constitution. That's not the kind of speech the Founding Fathers had in mind, though. They weren't planning on constitutionally protecting obscenity, but in our world now, pornography has gotten way out of hand. And so there are two difficulties in dealing with obscenity. The first one is up until 1973, there was no concrete definition of what obscenity was. So it was difficult for the courts to kind of pin that down. But in 1973, they actually came up with what, it was kind of a complicated three-part definition. So since then, we now have a definition, but the second difficulty is not a lot of prosecutors want to go after adult pornography. They don't want to mess with it. You know, I think it's so rampant. Now they'll go after some child pornography, but they don't, a lot of them aren't courageous or brave enough to really go after the adult pornography. So it would be great if we got more attorney generals in there that were willing to actually, you know, to go after stuff like that. Wow. So far we have defamation of character and obscenity, and the third area is inciting violence. So there was a case in 1969 called Brandenburg versus Ohio. And in that case, there was a Ku Klux Klan leader that said these words. He said that if the government officials kept advancing racial minorities, the Klan might have to take some revengeance. Okay, so they were taken to court for that, but the court said, although we don't agree this is a good thing, they're still constitutionally protected. So at that point in the case, they came up with more of some parameters around what would be considered inciting violence. So two things must be true for it to be inciting violence. And I'm going to read these. The first one is the speech had to be directed at inciting or producing imminent lawless action. And the second thing is that it must be shown that the speech was likely to incite or produce such action. So now we had much more of a two defined parameters there. Now, the First Amendment should protect all kinds of speech, even including hate speech, right? But what we've seen lately is we've seen a lot of people claim that they're offended, and so they call it hate speech. But it's very interesting because there is no constitutional right to not be offended. It's not in there. Right. On this whole kick about I'm offended and I need to save space, but that's nowhere in the Constitution at all. And so you can't really say, well, I'm offended, so I'm gonna have a case against you or something like that. But we have a disheartening trend. There was a case that happened in 2004. There was a gay parade, and there were some Bible-believing Christians that decided they were going to protest the parade. And what they did was they had their Bibles and they had signs that said homosexuality is a sin. Jesus can set you free. So we all know this is not good, right? So what happened was, and they also had bullhorns where they were saying, repeating what their sign said. So they got surrounded by some of the people in the gay parade, and the cops came over and they arrested them. Okay, even though it was what I would consider peaceful protesting. I mean, they weren't causing any damage to anybody. But so they arrested them for disturbing the peace. But the sad thing was, and the unconstitutional trend was, they also slapped on them for their a hate speech crime. And not only did that, when the reason they said they were getting them for hate speech was the content of what they were saying. And so they were saying, because you said homosexuality is a sin, we're going to slap a hate speech thing on you. Well, okay, so, time went by and then another judge came along and reversed that. But by then the damage had been done. They had already, the country had already seen they got away with that, and that hate speech wasn't going to be accepted. And then after that, other cases came along too, where they ruled that, oh, you can't use hate speech and you can be, criminalized for that. But then the judge reversed it, but then it was too late. So there is no constitutional right to not be offended. It's not in there, but we can see, what our society is doing. So, in conclusion, really the bottom line is, and one more thing too, is the government can never silence your speech based on its content. Never. So that's a really good right for us to know, because, we could be anywhere in this country and somebody could come against us for the content of our speech. As long as it's not defamation, obscenity, and inciting violence, we are constitutionally protected. So that's something to keep in mind. And then really, conclusion-wise, I really feel like we have to remember that being offended is, I'm sorry, but that's too bad. People are going to offend us every day, right? You can't use that to get back at others. But our speech is free. We have freedom of speech in the press, but there are consequences that go with what we say.
All right, Debbie. Thank you very much. Now, we got to move along here. You're coming back with us on September 28th.
Yes.
And you're going to be talking about freedom of association.
Yes, right in line with all the protesting that's going on. Oh, I mean the peaceful protesting.
Peaceful protesting.
Yeah.
Yeah. Got to keep that in mind.
Absolutely.
Debbie, thank you so much. Thank you very much. Have a good evening.
Thanks for having me on.
All right, Debbie Stewart. I always enjoy her episodes of constitutional literacy. I'll tell you, it's we're very, very happy to have her do these episodes for us. So I hope you all enjoy this. Enjoy her episodes. Okay, let me get with my PowerPoint, and I want to keep myself on here, and we'll bring that up. And now, in order for you to get a good view of on your screen, I'm going to try and implement here the slideshow option, which hopefully will give you a better screen once this gets going here. I got that on. Okay. I want to be sure that I'm doing this right. Okay, I don't know. Nothing seems to be working here tonight. I'm going to restart this and try this again, folks. So bear with me here. What I'm trying to do is I'm trying to get a full screen view for you. And there we go. There we go. Finally, I guess maybe I was doing things in the wrong order. So hopefully you can see this now. All right. As Maringo Mike said, our vision statement here in Indiana is to build a Hoosier grassroots community of citizens and legislators dedicated to the constitutional concept of self-governance. Self-governance is the key here, and we're here in this broadcast. We're trying to focus on self-governance, and that's what we're trying to focus on. So that's our vision statement here in Indiana. Now, a couple main objectives that we've set forth here in 2020 to bring us closer to realizing that vision. Number one is to meet with all of our state legislators, that especially targeted ones, the ones we call targeted. Those are the ones that are, for the most part, they're new legislators, and we may not know how they stand or whether they support Convention of States. So we may have to engage in some education to bring them on board. But that's a very key objective, is meeting with our state legislators. The other objective is growing the grassroots. I'll have a little bit more when I get into numbers on this, but we want to get to 52,000 supporters here in Convention of States supporters. We want to get to 52,000 here in 2020. And I'll tell you, we are on track to meeting this goal, this objective. Resources that we have available here in Indiana. Conventionofstates.com is our major website. That's our national website. That's the first place to go if you want to get involved in Convention of States. State website page, conventionofstates.com/Indiana. Then social media platforms. Our main one is Facebook. We have Convention of States Indiana as our state Facebook page. This broadcast is coming to you through that state Facebook page. YouTube channel, I mentioned this earlier, COS Indiana, where we're now live streaming the broadcast. We also have narrated PowerPoints on there. We have recordings of these broadcasts that we do. We have links to a great podcast that our legislative liaison, Paul Phillips, does. It's called The Free to Be Free. So whenever he generates a new podcast, we put a link there so that you can easily get to it and listen to it. Other platforms, Twitter, Instagram, LinkedIn, so if you're into social media, you should not have any problem finding us on social media. Some quick numbers. 2019, we hit 41,000 supporters here in Indiana. As we stated earlier, our goal for 2020 is 52,000. We have about 80 individuals in leadership roles of one sort or another here in Indiana. And as I mentioned, if you want to get involved, which we want you to get involved, if nothing else, become a supporter and go to our national website, conventionestates.com, open an account, sign the petition, and become a supporter. Now, that's an important step right there. Now, if you want to get more involved, then click on the menu selection called Take Action. Scroll down to where it says Become a Leader, and look at the different volunteer positions that we have. If one's of interest to you, open it up, read about it. If you're really interested, go ahead and make application. Don't worry, you're not obligated in any way, but that means then your name comes up on a report that one of us then will be able to make contact with you and talk about it further. I caution you, please look at the estimated time required on these positions. You are the only one that knows how much time you have available to devote to any of these positions. So please take note of what the estimated time commitment would be on each of the positions. But we would love to have your involvement. Finally, Convention of States Basics. These are the three tenets that our program's based upon, not only here in Indiana, but nationally. That's the problem, the solution, and the plan. Now, we've identified in the problem, we've identified three major abuses that we think are going on in the federal government. The solution, of course, is to call a convention of states for the purpose of proposing amendments to the Constitution that would deal with those three abuses that we've identified. And then, of course, the plan on how we want to bring this about. So once again, if you go to that national website, conventionofstates.com, click on the menu selection called Resources, and that page is full of information explaining these basics. So I encourage you to go to the national website and take a look at those. All right, let me come back to, let's see who's been joining us tonight. I see we've got Linda Gonzalez, and she's one of our district captains, and she is always with us every week. And Lydia says, I always learn something from Debbie. So you're right. Very, very good. Thank you for joining us, Lydia. Also see we have Richard Loken. Great stuff. Thanks, Richard. Richard's a region captain for us up in the northern part of Indiana. So thanks for joining us tonight, Richard. All right, folks. I want to now get into the final segment of our broadcast this evening. And this is the invitation part. Now, I've already invited you on a couple times during this broadcast, but I want to invite you again to join us here in Indiana and Convention of States, because we obviously we need your help. We want your help. We want your involvement. Now, before I go any further, I do want to mention here that on our next broadcast, which will be next Monday evening, 7 p.m., be the 24th of August, we're going to be bringing on one of our national people. Her name is Jenny Rapini. Now, Jenny was scheduled to be on our broadcast last week, but due to different technical problems and conditions, our broadcast, we had to end it. So we decided that we would bring Jenny back again on the 24th, which would be next Monday. Jenny is our National Grassroots Director. So those of us in Convention of States know her name very well, and I'm sure you'll enjoy hearing about her job and what all she does in Convention of States. So I want to wrap things up this evening. One more thing that we want your involvement, and we want you to get involved. But keep in mind here that we think there is a fundamental question facing our country today, and the question is not what should we do. The question is who decides. And I heard it said this week, and I really believe this, that a lot of the turmoil going on in our country today, and a lot of things that are happening in our country today, really stems from too many decisions being made in Washington, D.C. and decisions that should be made at our state level, at our county, our city, community level. Too many decisions are being made in Washington, D.C. So the question really is it's not what should we do. The question is who decides, and that's what we're all about. And that's we the people believe we're the ones that should be making more of these decisions. So I had to think about that, when I heard that said, and I the more I thought about it, the more I thought, that is true. That is very, very true. Too much is being decided out of Washington, D.C., and really, we the people need to be more involved in these decisions. So, with that, folks, we'll wrap things up for the evening. I want to thank you again for tuning in. Be sure again to join us next Monday evening, 7 p.m. And if you can't join us through Facebook, join us on our YouTube channel, COS Indiana, where we're live streaming now. So with that, I will say good night, everyone.